Third moved to Mulberry Village. I had always dreamed of a quiet life in the countryside, so when I found the old Victorian house in Mulberry Village, it seemed like destiny. The village was picturesque, with cobblestone paths and charming cottages. My new home stood proudly, ivy creeping up its walls, and the garden burst with vibrant flowers. As I moved in, the sun set, casting a warm, golden glow over the scene. The first night was peaceful. I sat by the roaring fireplace, sipping tea and reading a book while the wind howled outside. But as I settled into bed, I heard it, a faint, rhythmic thudding from the attic. My heart pounded as I listened intently, but exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. The next night, the noise was louder, more insistent. Thud, thud, thud. Determined to investigate, I grabbed a flashlight and ascended the creaky attic stairs. Dust and cobwebs filled the air, and old, forgotten items were strewn about. Nothing seemed amiss, but the sense of unease lingered. Back in my room, I was jolted awake by scratching behind the headboard. Fear gripped me as I lay frozen, listening to the unnerving sounds. I decided to seek help and visited the village library the next day. Mr. Collins, the librarian, handed me an old folder labelled Mulberry House. Inside were articles about Emily Turner's disappearance and Robert Hale's tragic death. Armed with this grim history, I set up a camera in the attic, hoping to capture whatever was causing the disturbances. That night, as I reviewed the footage, my blood ran cold. A ghostly face stared directly into the camera, its hollow eyes filled with sorrow and rage. The haunting had just begun. The ghostly face on the camera confirmed my worst fears. Determined to uncover the truth, I returned to the library the next day. Mr. Collins seemed unsurprised by my urgency. He led me to a hidden section of the library where I found the journal of Thomas Mulberry, the house's original owner. Reading the journal, I discovered Mulberry had been obsessed with the occult. He had built a hidden room in the house's foundation for dark rituals, attempting to communicate with spirits. His entries grew increasingly frantic as he wrote about a malevolent spirit demanding sacrifices. The final entry was a desperate plea, realizing he had unleashed something far worse than he had anticipated. Armed with this knowledge, I returned home, determined to find the hidden room. Hours of searching led me to a faint seam in the basement wall. Prying it open revealed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. At the bottom was a small stone chamber filled with strange symbols and a dark stained altar. The air was thick with a malevolent presence. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoed, "You cannot escape!" A shadowy figure with glowing eyes lunged at me. I dodged, grabbed Mulberry's ritual book from the altar, and fled up the stairs. The spirit's enraged wails followed me as I slammed the secret door shut. Back in the safety of my living room, I opened the ritual book. It contained instructions to bind the spirit. I gathered the necessary items: candles, herbs, and Emily's locket. That night, I prepared for the ritual, hoping to banish the spirit for good. As night fell, I set up the ritual in the basement. Candles were arranged in a circle, and protective symbols were drawn on the floor. The atmosphere grew heavy with tension. I lit the candles, and the temperature plummeted. The air was thick with dread. I began to chant the incantation, holding Emily's locket tightly. The spirit manifested, a shadowy figure with glowing eyes. It lunged at me, but the protective symbols flared to life, holding it at bay. The spirit roared, an inhuman sound shaking the house's foundations. I continued the chant, my voice growing stronger despite the fear. The locket glowed with a fierce light, and the spirit recoiled, its form distorting. With a final desperate cry, it was drawn toward the altar, trapped by the ancient words. The room exploded with light, then fell silent. The oppressive weight lifted. Exhausted, I collapsed, clutching the locket. The nightmare seemed over. The following days were a blur. I cleaned the basement, erased the symbols, and tried to restore normalcy. Yet, unease lingered. Small items moved on their own, and cold drafts chilled warm rooms. It felt as though the house was watching, waiting. One evening, the lights flickered and the temperature dropped. The thudding started again, louder and more insistent. Fear gripped me as I realized I had only bound the spirit temporarily. Its malevolence was too powerful, deeply rooted in the house's history. I couldn't stay. I packed my belongings, leaving behind the journal and Mulberry's book. As I drove away, the house loomed in my rearview mirror, dark and foreboding. Mulberry House still stands, waiting for its next occupant, its secrets buried within. And as the sun sets, casting long shadows over the village, the thudding starts again.